Hello everyone and welcome back to my YouTube channel. My name is Ren. I have a lot of energy and I'm super excited for today's topic. So today we are talking all about self-care, also known as something that us writers really suck at. So we are nearing the end of November. Somehow, I do not know how. I feel like it was November 1st yesterday and now we're like about to be done with the month. What is time? We don't know them. So I really wanted to talk about self-care because self-care during NaNoWrimo is super important, and it's honestly important all times of the year. So again, even if you're not doing nano, this is a relevant topic. For those of you who don't know, this month I've been doing a bunch of nano-inspired videos, and most of them will apply to you even if you're not doing NaNoWrimo. So far, I have covered tips for slaying NaNoWrimo, your writing mindset, a writing pep talk, and now we're talking all about self-care. So if you have missed my previous videos inspired by Nano, I will have them linked up above in the cards, as well as down in the description box down below, so go check them out. So now I have really refined my self-care routine from the last maybe like 2 or 3 months. So now I'm dishing out my top 5 tips for you to take care of yourself, because that shit's important. Number 1, figure out how you, no one else, how you define self-care. Self-care is different for everyone, and the way that I define self-care may be different than how you define it. And you can't begin to build a self-care routine without first asking yourself, what do you define as self-care? For me, I keep things pretty simple, and self-care just means that I'm taking time for myself and that I am regularly having time in my day where I don't have a bunch of goals, you know? I'm not worried about editing my book or making these videos or reading or anything else. I'm just focused on taking care of myself. It's essentially how I define self-care, and you need to figure out how you define it for yourself. And then on top of that, it's also important to think about what exactly you can do during your self-care times. So for example, for me, my self-care times are very regular. So for 6 days a week, I have 3 hours at the end of my day, which is my self-care time. I do whatever I want, and this is just kind of my resting time to make sure I have this time in order to recharge. And then at the very end of the week, typically on Sundays, I have my self-care day, where the entire day I do not have any goals. I can do whatever I want. Sometimes I read on Sundays. Sometimes I watch Teen Wolf. My last self-care day, I watched an entire season of Teen Wolf. So I love that for me. And I actually have an entire list on my computer of tasks that I personally consider to be self-care activities for me. And I want you to do the same thing. So open up a Word doc, a Google Doc, whatever. You can do this in a bullet journal, a notebook, a random piece of paper, whatever you want. And I want you to write down 2 things. First thing, write down what self-care is for you. You do not have to use my definition, although you definitely can if you want to. You can come up with your own, whatever you want. And then the second thing I want you to do is write down activities that you would consider to be self-care for yourself. 2, taking the time for yourself. So in my opinion, it's best to have both small ways to take care of yourself and long ways. So for example, there are some self-care activities that I do that take 5 to 30 minutes, and there are some that I do that I save for Sunday because they take hours. And like I mentioned in the previous point, I personally take 3 hours each day for myself, and then I have a full day for myself at the end of the week. So you don't need to use the same time intervals that I do, because for example, I know a lot of people where they can't take a full day off. They can't do that in their schedule for whatever reason, and that's okay. Maybe instead you want to take a really easy day that day, or you want to devote half of your day to self-care and half of it to finishing up the rest of your tasks for that week. So bottom line is, you want to try and figure out just about how much time you want to be able to give yourself for self-care, but don't be afraid to change these in the future, because the entire process of making sure you're taking care of yourself is a learning experience. I am honestly still changing things in my process pretty much every week, so it's just one big learning experience. And number 3, I kind of already touched on this, but I wanted to go a little bit more in depth, which is what exactly can you do on your self-care times or days. And I think for a lot of people, this is the hardest part about taking care of yourself, is it's hard to think about what you can do. So to help you out with that, I have compiled a list of things that you could possibly do for shorter amounts of time. So for example, anywhere from like 5 minutes to like an hour, here are some examples of things you could do. You could watch a comfort movie or TV show, book, play with your pets or take a bath, put on a face mask, do some journaling, meditate, do some breathing exercises, or do your nails. And then for a day that you want to completely dedicate to your self-care, here are some things that you could do throughout the day. You could go for a walk, you could have a dance party, watch or listen to something inspiring, get a massage, you could sleep in, you could do some yoga, order or make your favorite food or drinks, do something artistic, some daily affirmations, or you could just talk to someone that you really care about. And you can also take over activities from the first list and just do a bunch of them like on like a longer extended period of time. And personally for me, I think that it's good to have a really long list of these different activities that you may want to do, because pretty much every night and every like full self-care day that I have looks different. I have yet to have a time where I'm doing the exact same thing. I tend to switch it up a lot, just kind of depending on what I want to do. But basically all of the activities that I listed are just some examples. And I do have a Pinterest board filled with self-care ideas that I'll have linked down below if you want to check it out. And number 4, let's talk about what isn't self-care, because just like how it's important to talk about what is self-care, it's also important to talk about what is not. So I think, you know, in our time, in the current world, self-care is a term that is thrown around a lot. And sometimes I just look at it like, is that really self-care? Like, is it really? So when you're practicing self-care, think back to the first step of this video when we defined what self-care is for us personally and what, you know, what activities we want to do for our self-care days. And kind of think of that with what you're doing to practice self-care and think, am I actually practicing self-care, or am I just saying that I'm practicing self-care? Let's say you have an in-person college class. Let's say you are going into this class and you were just like so anxious and you just like you can't do it. You're like, no, I'm gonna go home. But for example, let's say that instead of just having a regular lecture, which you could probably just make up later, you have a huge exam. And let's say your teacher is one of those really nice people who don't let you make up tests. So then you have to think about it logically. Like, am I really taking care of myself if I'm going to miss a huge exam that is going to hugely negatively affect my grade? So maybe instead of just skipping that class altogether, you say, okay, I'm gonna go to this class, I'm gonna do this exam, and then I'm gonna go home, and then I'm gonna do my self-care activities. I'm going to read a book, or take a bath, or watch Netflix, or what the fuck ever. Because you're taking care of yourself in more than one way. You are taking care of yourself academically by making sure you are still going to that exam so that you're not going to lose a shit ton of points, but you're also making sure that once it is all said and done, you go home. Personally, if I had a really anxious day and I just had a lecture, I would just go home. I wouldn't like sit through it. I don't think it's worth it. But if I had an exam, I wouldn't, because at least in my mind, that it's not really taking care of myself, because then I have this huge grade that's just a 0, and it's like, oh, fuck my life then. And I mean, this kind of says more about the US education system than anything, but I still think that it's a relevant example. Ultimately, what you do and don't consider self-care is completely up to you, but I would just consider, you know, what you don't consider self-care in general. That this can also come with some practice, because for example, I remember my first few self-care days, I used to do it so that I would just do whatever I wanted. So if I wanted to write, I would write. If I wanted to make a video, I'd make a video, whatever. But then I found that I wasn't really breastfeeding because I was still doing work. It wasn't planned work, but I was still doing work, and that wasn't really resting time, you know, that wasn't really helping me recharge. That was just letting me do what the fuck I wanted. But again, it didn't, you know, it didn't really help take care of myself really, because it would backfire, because then with the next week I would be so exhausted because I never took that full day off like I was supposed to. So again, self-care days is really just a lot of trial and error and figuring out what helps you and what doesn't. And lastly, number 5 is to have a self-care box. I'll be completely honest, I haven't done this one yet, but I plan on doing it really soon because I really love this idea. And I can't remember where I first saw this post, but apparently it's like a huge thing that's really popular, but I didn't know about it until like maybe a month ago. But basically, a self-care box is a box that you could have like on your self-care day, or just when you're feeling really anxious or depressed or whatever. It's like a box for you to have all of these things that you can use to take care of yourself. And I love this idea because there's just all of these cute, you know, these cute and helpful things all in one spot. And self-care boxes can look so cute, but I love the idea of them so much. But you may be sitting there thinking, okay, Ren, you know, that sounds like a great idea, but what the fuck do I put in this thing? Well, I have got a few ideas for you. You could have candles, coloring books, magazines, a journal, chocolate, a quote jar, a worry jar, a positive affirmations jar, a stress ball, bath bombs, a poetry book, maybe a short story collection, a nice note to yourself, face masks, body scrubs. I could go on. Those are just some examples. And as far as the box itself, you could just take like a shoe box and make it your self-care box. It really doesn't matter. Just as long as it's a box with a bunch of items for you to help take care of yourself. I think this is a really good idea because it can really help you kind of almost limit yourself to just like paying attention to those things. And I just think that's like a really cute thing to have in order to make sure that you are taking care of yourself. And with that being said, that is all that I've got for you today. So I hope I was able to give you some good tips on how to take care of yourself, whether you're doing NaNoWrimo or not. It is important to take care of yourself at all points in the year. So make sure you're taking care of yourself, goddammit. So if you enjoyed today's video, please give it a big thumbs up and hit the bigger subscribe button down below. My NaNoWrimo posting extravaganza is ending next week, so don't miss it. Next week, I may or may not be giving you some self-editing tips. Totally am. So you don't want to miss it. It's amazing. And yeah, I think that's all I've got for you today. So let me know in the comments down below how you practice self-care or what are some of your self-care tips. I would love to hear them. And that's all I've got. So I hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye!